Then, I started attending every HOA meeting. I didn't go to argue, not at first. I went to listen. I learned how they operated, how they budgeted, how decisions were made. I wrote about what happened to Buddy on local social media groups. I said I would bid on the Clubhouse loan, take control of their property if they defaulted, and turn it into a shelter for rescued dogs. The room went silent. The president, a weary man named Rick Slater who always wore a smug grin, looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. I posted photos of him in the vet's office, hooked up to machines, looking small and vulnerable. The HOA tried to scramble together payments, but their own mismanagement and lavish spending on unnecessary projects had drained their reserves. When the due date came, they couldn't pay. The clubhouse was mine. They filed complaints, tried to rally the neighborhood against me. But the community had seen the truth. They knew what had happened to Buddy. They knew what kind of people had been running the HOA. The clubhouse, once a symbol of pettiness and control, became a place of hope. Families came to adopt dogs. Kids came to volunteer. The HOA, stripped of its pride and its power center, faded into the background. But in the end, they only helped me build something better, a sanctuary, not just for dogs, but for the spirit of the community. New, kinder board members were elected. The toxic culture crumbled. Support poured in. People donated supplies, money, time. The shelter thrived. The story spread. People were outraged. Dog lovers, animal rights folks, even neighbors who had never spoken to me before came forward offering support. I hired a good lawyer, a woman named Anita, who had worked in animal welfare cases for years and had more bite than a Rottweiler. The community had my back, and I wasn't alone this time. They'd hoped to scare me off with fancy letterhead, but the law was on my side. The day the dismissal arrived, I framed a copy of the ruling and hung it on the lobby wall of the shelter. She reviewed every line of their complaint and laughed. "They have no case," she told me. "You've got every permit in place." Rick Slater, the same smug president who had nearly gotten Buddy killed, came stomping into Buddy's haven one afternoon, his face red with rage. Finally, he turned and stormed out, slamming the door behind him so hard the glass rattled. Word spread that he'd resigned from the board. A few of his diehard followers quit too. The HOA limped along after that, struggling to regain its power. But most of the neighbors had already seen enough. They didn't want the kind of leadership anymore. If they want to fight, let them waste their money. Handmade quilts draped over the kennels. Hand-painted dog names on plaques. Volunteers had turned what was once a sterile meeting hall into a warm, welcoming place. Donations for legal fees poured in. Volunteers offered to help. But now, in a way, he had hundreds of brothers and sisters, all safe under the same roof. From a poisoned piece of meat to a thriving dog rescue. With the success of Buddy's haven, donations poured in. Enough to buy the empty lot next door and build a proper dog park. People who once barely spoke to each other were now working side by side, united by something simple: love for animals. Kids and their pets could play together, neighbors could gather, and we could hold weekend adoption fairs. The day we cut the ribbon, the place was packed, laughing families, wagging tails, and volunteers handing out homemade treats. Buddy was back to his old self, strong and playful, running through the backyard like he'd never been sick. Every morning he bounded toward the door, tail wagging, eager to visit the shelter that now felt like his second home. From fines and threats to an entire community standing together, it made me believe that even in the ugliest corners of suburbia, good people still outnumbered the bad. I learned that their precious clubhouse, a newly renovated space they used for their meetings and parties, wasn't fully paid off. Their eyes widened as they met Daisy, a three-legged shepherd mix who had survived a house fire. The girls fell in love instantly. When Daisy walked out the door with her new family, Buddy trotted alongside her to the car, like he was giving her a proper send-off. "I've saved it," I answered. "These dogs aren't trash. They're family. If you can't see that, maybe you're the problem." He was healthy again, stronger than ever. Around us, rescued dogs played, tails wagging, barking joyfully. I felt a deep, peaceful satisfaction. They'd taken out a small loan to cover the last of the renovation costs, and they were behind on payments. The clubhouse was collateral. Would they sabotage the shelter? I installed more cameras, secured the kennels, and made sure volunteers worked in pairs for safety. Our volunteer list tripled, and every week more families came to adopt. Watching kids meet their new dogs for the first time was the best feeling I'd ever known. Word of their new legal stunt spread fast. Local news stations came out to do stories on Buddy's Haven. The coverage was overwhelmingly positive. When the reporter asked if I was afraid of the HOA, I told the truth. They already tried to destroy what I loved most. I'm not afraid anymore. At the same time, I launched a public campaign. When the next HOA meeting came around, I stood up and told them, calmly but firmly, what I intended to do. Within a week of opening Buddy's Haven, I started getting letters again. This time they claimed my use of the building violated zoning rules. Even though I had gone through every legal step, every permit, and every inspection, their last desperate weapon was intimidation. They filed a civil complaint, arguing that a dog shelter would destroy property values in lakeside estates. You're bluffing, he said. The place was spotless, filled with expensive furniture, and polished wood floors. I cleared it all out. Within weeks, we had kennels installed, a small veterinary exam room set up, and volunteers lined up to help care for the dogs we took in. Buddy became the unofficial mascot, greeting every visitor with a wag of his tail. But I wasn't. I worked with a friend in real estate to purchase the loan from the lender. It felt surreal, walking through the front doors of the building that had once been the heart of their little empire. At first, the HOA board tried to fight back. We called it Buddy's Haven. Over time, the neighborhood changed. One day, I stood in the yard behind the shelter, watching as Buddy lay in the grass, the sun warm on his golden fur. They had tried to break me by going after what I loved most, and every time I heard a bark echo from Buddy's Haven, I smiled, knowing that justice had found its way home. The HOA wasn't done trying to fight me. I didn't panic. I knew they were bluffing again. Still, the anxiety kept me awake some nights. These people had already poisoned my dog. How far would they go? That segment went viral online. Donations spiked, and even more volunteers showed up. A week later, the HOA's civil complaint was thrown out by the county court. It wasn't even close. But the HOA didn't disappear overnight. You've ruined this neighborhood, he shouted, jabbing a finger toward the kennels. I stayed calm, looking him straight in the eye. His mouth opened and closed like a fish, searching for some retort. That was the last time I saw Rick in any official capacity. Things settled after that. Buddy's Haven kept growing. We took in abandoned dogs, neglected dogs, even a couple of seniors whose owners had died. One Saturday, a family showed up with two young girls who had been begging their parents for a puppy. Moments like that kept me going. One evening, while closing up, I walked through the now familiar clubhouse, turned Dog Haven, and noticed the tiny details that made it feel alive. Buddy still slept at the foot of my bed every night, like he had since the day I adopted him from a rescue as a puppy. Some nights I lay awake, thinking about how far we'd come. I decided to keep expanding. Standing on the grass with Buddy next to me, I realized we transformed not just the clubhouse, but the entire neighborhood. For the first time in a long time, I felt safe in lakeside estates. Spring came early the following year, and with it, new life and new energy.